Welcome to the Three Championship Drive podcast on YouTube, hosted by me, Lance Caporossi. Follow me on X at Lance Caporossi, the same way you see it spelled on the screen. Do us a favor, hit the subscribe button, like the video, but more importantly, tell a Pistons fan. So, we finally got what we've been waiting for. Trajan Langdon's introductory press conference. I know your thoughts, and I'm gonna turn it over to you here in a second, but I watched it from the beginning to the end twice. And just because I have a low attention span and like 5 minutes into these things, I'm thinking about something else and I gotta keep going back. So I figured watch it twice, I'll pick something up that I didn't get the first time. But I was really impressed with how well spoken Trajan Langdon, how well spoken he is. Very clear, concise words, no analogies about famous actresses or anything like that. That's something we got a lot with Troy Weaver. Just very well spoken, very concise, good direction with his words. I was really impressed with Trajan Langdon. And I loved how he talked about building a foundation for success. And yes, it does depend on the players to win, but to build a winning organization, it takes more than the players. It starts from the top to the bottom, from your front office to your ticket sales to your merchandise guys. It takes everybody to build a winning organization. I love that he brought that up. But what were your thoughts about the introductory press conference?
Well, first off, it feels like it's been forever since I've been here. Work and life have just been incredibly busy. So, to all my fans out there, I'm back. But first thing, I haven't made any type of comment towards Monty Williams being kicked out of the building. And I just want to talk about that first before I get into the press conference. I think it was Tom Gores. Tom Gores ultimately made the decision to move on from Monty Williams, whether Trajan came in and told Tom, like, hey, we're going to do this. You figure out when you want to do it, but we're going to get rid of him. Or if it was Tom Gores just saying, I'm told when Trajan came in, gave him the idea of that's the move that they were all like automatically going to make before he came in and is taking over. But Monty, Troy, be gone with yourselves. Like, it's good. It's a good rebuild. It sucks that we feel like we have to go through this transition again as Pistons fans, like hoping that we're finally going to find the right thing out there that's going to fit well with this organization. Now, at this point, who cares? Me and Lance have been talking about trying to clean house, getting rid of cooks in the kitchen, trying to make it where it's just physically one guy making the decision. And that's how I'm gonna go over and transition into their press conference. Tom Gores made it clear, absolutely 150% clear. If you haven't watched the press conference, I'll tell you what, all you have to do is hear Tom Gores say Trajan Langdon is the CEO. It's all you need to hear, because he's going to say it 30 times, because I don't think there was any other way that Tom wanted to address the man's position and what power he has as being the new president of basketball operations. But we have a CEO guy involved with Trajan Langdon. He's already making moves. He's already bringing in pieces, bringing in the shooting coach. That is huge for this team. That is huge for the future of this team. And it's huge for our number 5 overall pick coming up here on Wednesday. I don't know when you're going to release this, but this upcoming Wednesday for this draft. This is a great transition. And Trajan, like Lance said, he is a very well-spoken man. It sucks as a Pistons fan that you want to automatically see the wins. That's what we want. We want to see improvement. But he's right when he says that we need to build a foundation for these players, because I feel like they just came off a year of basketball that they didn't have the opportunity to be open, to be honest, to be able to talk about what they want to improve on. Like, I feel like they were held hostage with Monty, with being able to make any type of talks to like a Troy Weaver that was involved. So I think with him building his foundation and doing things the right way, his way, I think we're going to see improvement, but it is going to be really slow, because he wasn't talking so much about wins and losses. He was just talking about improving the organization as a whole. And yeah, we want to win right away, but we know that's not going to happen here. We want to see what this guy can do, want to see what he wants to do with the organization. I'm assuming we're going to get another press conference from him, because it seems like he's very open to the media from how he addressed all of the things that were going on at hand. Granted, he can't tell us everything that he's doing, because why would he let in on a secret like that? But I know I'm rambling,
No,
but
you're good. You're good.
with the presser, it showed me that Trajan. It looks like he wants to be here. It looks like he wants to have this tough battle in front of him. Like I think he really does want it, and I think Tom finally has somebody that he can sit next to and actually give the reins to and let him make the decisions that he wants to make. With Troy, later in the career in Detroit, that wasn't something I don't think Tom could do. He had to be involved. And with Trajan, he is openly letting him do whatever he wants to do to improve this team. And like I said, bringing in the shooting coach, Vincent, that was huge because Vincent was in New Orleans for 13 or 14 years. So that says a lot about Trajan Langdon and what he brings with and how he carries himself, that he wants people that have been in a situation with family and kids for so long to just uproot and move to this type of organization, knowing that they have to give 150% just to improve it. So with the presser, I agree with you. I think Trajan, he's spoken very well, and I think he means what he says.
I also think having a guy like Fred Vinson, Michael Blackstone, and J.R. Holden just quickly uproot their families like you're talking about. They've been in places for a minute, and it shows what kind of leader Trajan Langdon is and what he's going to be doing for this organization, where you have guys that have been in places for a long time that are just willing to uproot their family and then follow him to Detroit to, we'll just say it, the most likely by most fans out there, the worst spot in professional basketball at the moment, because it's just been a dumpster fire for so many years and with no clear direction. And with Langdon, you're getting I feel like you're getting a clear direction. You're getting a guy that's coming in with a plan that wants to, one, be held accountable, but also put the people in the right place that are going to help him envision his plan and execute his plan. So I'm very excited. I mean, I was excited for Troy Weaver, but I'm much more excited for Trajan Langdon after watching this press conference. Now, I do have some takeaways, and this just comes from team building, and that's what I'm talking about, team building and roster construction. One, I like that they are, even though I've been adamant about trading some of the young guys, I'm glad that he's ultimately going to stick with the young guys and continue to develop those guys as well. And I feel like this first season under Trajan Langdon and the new head coach, we're going to get an evaluation year. That's what we're going to get. He's going to see what these young guys can do, see how they fit, or if they don't fit, and then make those moves that some of us don't want to see happen. He will eventually make those moves. I like that he's talking about surrounding the young guys with veterans that fit their skill set and that will help them grow as players. That was something that Troy Weaver never talked about when he was here, and Trajan Langdon is bringing it up, and I love that he's talking about bringing in veterans. Now, it looks like they're going to take on bad contracts, and we'll get into some bad contract players here in a minute, but he's looking for bad contract players who can still contribute while collecting assets. Again, something Troy Weaver never did when he was here as the GM of the Detroit Pistons. Then Trajan will look to bring in players that make Cade's life easier, which I absolutely love. I'm so glad that basically you're talking about like Cade is the guy, and the things he did his third year in the league, which was 23 points a game, around 8 assists, improved his 3-point shooting, but the way he had to get those numbers was very difficult for him because the players around him weren't creating enough space. And I'm glad that Trajan said, look, we're going to bring in help for this guy, and it's going to be a lot easier for him. And I'm glad that he talked about shooting and spacing the floor, how it can ultimately help guys like Cade and Jaden Ivey, but also can keep the turnovers down. But those are my key takeaways for team building and roster construction. But before we get into bad contract players, do you have any thoughts on those key takeaways?
Yeah, and I don't know if you noticed, he did make a comment when they asked about the draft coming up here within a week. He made a comment saying, "Well, we're still evaluating what we want to do with the 5th pick, but we're also interested in trading the pick as well." Now, Did he want to say that to actually mean anything? I don't know, but that's the only thing I took away from that comment, is that maybe this guy's got something up his sleeve and knows a lot more than we do right now. Like, I do agree that when they said that they were working their tails off for the last 3 to 4 weeks. I can believe that's a thing because there's so much they have to prepare for with free agency, with doing anything they can do with gaining more assets for this team and the NBA draft. So they are working prolifically, I think, on trying to figure out how they want to build. But when he said something about trading the pick, that is a green flag to me, and I'm okay with it. If they don't see what they want at 5, they're not just going to accept that pick. They're going to try to make more out of it. And I like that. I think he already, to me, with his demeanor and that presser, I think he's very comfortable with the decisions that he's going to make. And he's not going to talk like, and even if he does fail, I think he is also one that's going to be able to own up to his failures as well.
Exactly. And I'm glad you brought up the 5th pick talk, because that is something that I wrote down where I was like, ooh, that is, I like that little nugget of information. It could mean nothing.
Yeah.
But I think it's just, look, we're going to explore all possibilities for this 5th pick. Does not mean we're drafting at 5, because like we've talked about on this podcast plenty of times, some of the names that have been rumored to be available with the 5th pick, you could also probably find them at 7, 8, 9, 10, possibly even outside of the top 10. Like we're talking like 11 or 12 or 13. So there is a possibility where they move that 5th pick, bring in a bad contract, but they still stay in the lottery, which I'm excited for. But let's talk about some of these big bad contract players. I hate calling them bad contract players. Go out and get your money. If a team's willing to pay you, just go ahead and take it. I'm going to give you some names. Just tell me yes or no if you would want the Pistons and Trajan Langdon to bring them in. I'm going to read you off a couple of names. It's Zach LaVine, 3 years, $136 million. Yes or no? Okay. Ben Simmons, 1 year, $40 million.
I want all the names first. I want them all first.
Okay.
Yeah.
Then Andrew Wiggins, 3 year, $84 million. Tim Hardaway Jr., 1 year, $16 million. DeAndre Hunter, 3 year, $68 million. Clint Capella, 1 year, $22 million. Kevin Huerter, 2 year, $33 million. Brandon Clark, 4 year, $52 million.
Oh man.
Look, they're not going to be able to spend all $60 million in free agency.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. And it's hard. It's really hard to tell what Trajan wants to build. Because going back to the presser, I think he has a game plan somewhere. He has an idea of what he wants to do. Also, I'm trying not to resort back to it because there's just so much to talk about with that press conference. If you haven't seen it, go and watch it. But I think him talking about the young players and how he wants them to all improve, I think he has a full investment timeline on these guys. And even sitting down and saying that he talked to all the players, I think he has an idea of really where he wants to go with this. I can already tell he's probably talked to Cade on the list that you even gave me of, hey, I got this. Who do you want? What do you want? What's going to make us better? Who do you think you can work the best with? Let's have this conversation. And I think with that group, as much as I was against Zach LaVine, I'm starting to lean towards maybe that would be a good idea for this team to take on. Now, there's a lot of good players in this. I would also love maybe an Andrew Wiggins if we couldn't swing for the fences with Brandon Ingram. I think Andrew Wiggins could also be a good player for this team with his size and length and his athleticism. But it's really hard to look at all these guys' dollar amounts and want to just take on the bag that they already have. So with what I said, I like LaVine, I like Wiggins. I wouldn't take a shot on Ben Simmons. When it comes to getting a big guy like maybe Clint Capella, that depends on the future of this team. If we're gonna go away from Jalen Duren, then maybe Clint Capella is a better move than Jalen Duren. So, but I think with Trajan, with what we pursue and what we hear, and I hope he has another press conference about more information of what he wants to build this team on. I think we'll figure out more of who we're going to attack in free agency.
Yeah, I think we will, but I think the days of spending a lot of the cap space, I know Nick Claxton's been rumored to the Detroit Pistons. I forget who put the rumor out there, but it was just on X the last couple of days. But I don't know if that's going to be true anymore for him. I don't know if they're going to want to bring in a Nick Claxton at $25 million a year or $22 million, whatever it's going to be. I just think that way of thinking might need to go out the window and just looking at a list like this. And there are other players out there, but these guys are on bad contracts that can still contribute. When I'm looking at the list, you know I like Zach LaVine. I think from a skill set and what he offers a team, it makes the most sense next to Cade and Jaden Ivey. But I mean, I'm interested in Kevin Herter as well. I know he's been up and down with his time in Sacramento, but he's still a very good player. Andrew Wiggins, again, had a kind of a bad year by his standards in Golden State. I really like him as well. Tim Hardaway Jr., it's only a 1-year deal, but I mean, I don't know if I'd even want to trade with Dallas right now just because they are a pretty good team, and I would have to look and see what kind of draft capital they have. But Andrew Wiggins, a guy that he might be number one on my list just because of the different type of versatility you can bring with him on this team in the form of a lineup. And he's also young enough to where, like, once you really start competing again, you might be able to re-sign him on a cheaper deal where he can help contribute in winning. But also, I am interested in DeAndre Hunter, who's someone I have never really been high on. I really like the list of guys that are on bad contracts. And Brandon Clark, he's another one of those guys. I don't know if Memphis trades him, but I've always mentioned Memphis as a trade back partner for Santi Aldama. But maybe if they're willing to give up on Brandon Clark and you could bring him in, he'd be a nice name as well. But those are the bad contract players. What are your final thoughts on the press conference?
Overall, I just think it's hard to say because you want to say that you feel like we're in good hands, but then shit could hit the fan tomorrow, dude. We don't know, or we could go and we could really botch the draft, man. Like, you don't really know. I just know at the end of the day, from listening to, I don't like listening to Tom Gores in the media because you just keep saying the same answer over and over again. Like I said, as many times you just kept referring to Trajan Langdon as the CEO and the boss. We know, dude, that's what you gave the job for. Like, we all know that's what he's supposed to be doing. That's what Troy was supposed to be doing, but I guess you didn't have anything to say with that. So I like what Trajan has to say. I'm confident that he does have a game plan involved. And I really do think that he is very intrigued on making the culture back to how the Pistons used to be. Now, granted, it was a long time ago, but I think he understands what level of like seriousness needs to be taken in this organization that has maybe been lacking the last 2 years. So I like where we're at. I do want to hear more from him. I want more information to be coming out other than this. And the one thing I actually did want to ask you is, do you think it was a good thing or a bad thing for all these moves to be made with Tom Gores and Trajan? Like, do you think it was good that they already happened and then they had a presser? Or do you think it would have been better if they would have came out instantly with a press conference with a plan and then made the decisions? Do you think that has any effect on anybody?
I think the firings were a good decision before the press conference because that press conference would have been much different if Monty Williams had still been the head coach of the Detroit Pistons. Especially, there would have been so many questions talking about him and maybe like the goals for the season if you had him still in place as the head coach. So I think firing Troy Weaver and firing Monty Williams, that was the best decision they made before the press conference. I really did enjoy it. I'm glad that you brought up though him talking about the banners. That was pretty cool that he acknowledged it's one of the organizations he's been in that has the most banners. Now, granted, he did play. I mean, he was with the Brooklyn Nets and the New Orleans Pelicans. So, I mean, it's still really cool that he acknowledged that, and I'm glad that he wants to. I hate to use the word restore, but restore them to greatness. I'm glad he wants to do that. But the coaching, this is the one thing that really stood out to me. His characteristics for a coach: they need to be a leader. They need to be a good communicator, a collaborator. They want to have a passion for development as well. And this was something we didn't get with Monty Williams. And that's why Monty Williams was kicked out of the door and he is fired. And I mean, he's not upset about it. I mean, he's getting paid from Phoenix and Detroit now. This guy's filthy rich and he no longer has a job. But let's talk about Monty Williams being fired. I know you briefly talked about it before we talked about the press conference. What are your thoughts on Monty Williams, and what was the most memorable part of his tenure in Detroit?
There was no memorable part. Is your memorable part the losing streak? Because that's pretty shitty. If that's the only thing that I had respect for Monty was the game versus the Knicks where we got hosed on a call and ended up losing the game at the buzzer. Granted, I think it was like game 60 something of the season, so it didn't matter. Like we are already losing so many games. But if it takes you more than half a season to show a little bit of fire for some of these guys, we don't care anymore. Like it's great that you went out and you said what you had to say. Oh, this sucks. It's why is it us? The referees suck. There needs to be accountable. There's a standard. No one cares, dude. Your standard is trash, and that's what you've been giving us for the past 40 games. So I don't think he has any right to call any official for not doing a good job because he can't do his job very well. I'm happy we did this. We couldn't. There's no way we could have started this season already on a bad note because that's what it would have been. There would have been a horrible taste in Pistons fans' mouths going into this game or this season just because we're retaining a guy that had the worst season in Pistons history. He knew he was gone, and I don't even think he wanted to come back. Like, I think he was okay with, even if it would have been a less amount of money on the contract for his buyout, he still would have took it. Like, I don't think he actually wanted to be a part of this organization because we've even talked before when he took the job, he was like, they just kept tossing dollar signs at him until he finally caved in and said, you know what, I'll do it. Like, you finally found the amount of being the highest paid coach in NBA history. Like, I guess I'll just do it. So, Monty being gone, that's a win. I think in the presser they talked about finding a head coach. It's not on the back burner, but it's important. But there's other things that they're still working on at the moment with finding a coach. But man, I do think it's pretty important that you find one before this draft because I feel like you want some type of insight for whoever you're going to bring on as the head coach of this team. I feel like you kind of want some type of idea of where he wants to go with what he wants to do. So, but the Monty Williams fire, I think we wanted it to happen, but we were so unsure of how Tom wanted to play it just because it was only 1 year. So it was really hard to judge, but I'm really happy they clean slated this thing. Now, like I already said, we're not going to win. I don't think we're going to win 30 games next year or this year. It's not going to be a thing. So don't get your hopes up for that. It's not going to happen. We are in a rebuild mode with every single, probably when it comes down, even all the way down to janitorial staff in the facility. Like, I feel like they're just in a full transition rebuild. I think we're going to see a lot of positive things. I think the communication will be a lot better with Trajan and whoever he brings in as a head coach. But it's obvious that there's already so many loyal guys to this man that we're already seeing join the team. So I think it's just going to keep getting better. Like, they're not going to bring in a coach that he's not going to trust. But Monty needed to go. His seat was hot just because I think his attitude and his leadership and not being able to develop young players. And that is very, very crucial to Trajan and what he wants to do.
Yeah, apparently there was some disconnect from him and other people in the organization, which is what you can't have. I remember Cade Cunningham being frustrated with him and telling him to challenge the call. I also, probably the most memorable moment outside of the losing streak, because honestly, I wanted that losing streak just to continue. I wanted to see how bad it could get with Troy Weaver and Monty Williams, at the helm of things.
Yeah.
But probably the most memorable moment was when I don't know the exact quote verbatim, but he was talking about how like he's not going to argue with the refs because he doesn't want to get fined because he doesn't want to spend his money. And I'm just like, dude, you have no fight for your players. And the fact that you just came out and said it, it just blew my mind. Like, God, it was such a bad hire. But that was probably the most memorable moment, at least in my opinion.
Jeez.
I'm glad that Trajan Langdon can bring in his own guy. We do have a list of coaches that are supposed to be interviewed, and now this list will get a little bit longer. I'm guessing within the next few days. But the three names that we have for sure that will be interviewed are Sean Sweeney. He's a defensive coach who's part of Dwayne Casey's staff. I know a lot of Pistons fans have been high on Sean Sweeney for a while. Then there's Micah Nori. I hope I'm saying his name right. He's with the Minnesota Timberwolves. He's filled in for Chris Finch when he was out with an injury, so he's actually has some playoff coaching experience. But he is the assistant coach for the Minnesota Timberwolves. And there's JB Bickerstaff. Now, I do like the name JB Bickerstaff, but also at the same time, every stop he's been at, he's only been for a few years because I feel like teams they know, maybe they know, like, this isn't the guy to get us to the promised land. He can help build a culture and a foundation, but ultimately we got to find someone else. I do like Sean Sweeney. I don't know a ton about him. I believe he was also given a little bit of credit for the development of Giannis, but I could be wrong about that. The thing is, I don't want a first time head coach coming here in Detroit. I feel like that's way too much pressure. And I know that you were telling me earlier that you're like, I don't know what pressure there would be. I mean, Monty's this season was so bad. Like, dude, you win 18 games, you're good. But again, I need someone with a little bit of experience, a guy that hasn't been rumored to the Detroit by any like big name, like an Adrian Wojnarowski or a Sham Sharnarnia. James Borrego, that would be my guy to come in and coach the Detroit Pistons. He had 43 wins his final year in Charlotte. I feel like if given a few more times, he could have kept getting them to the playoffs. And he's an offensive-minded coach. That's what I want from the Detroit Pistons. I want a little creativity on that side of the ball. But what is your thoughts on this list of coaches that I have provided for you? I gave you 3 rumored coaches, and then I gave you 3 names that I also like that I didn't mention.
So I don't know. I don't know how I fully agree with you bringing in someone that doesn't have head coaching experience.
Okay.
I think Trajan is going to be 100% all for bringing in a guy that he can trust. And I think when it comes to coaching and developing young players, I think it's really important that the president and the coach have that relationship and have that like earned trust between each other, just because of developing young players is so important in this league, because obviously that's how we get new players in the league. So I'd be okay with bringing on a new guy and having it his first season as a head coach. I wouldn't have an issue with it. Out of your list, I do really like James Borrego. I think he would be probably the most successful within this team. And I think I've seen a lot of other Pistons podcasts talking about James Borrego as well. So I really do like that option. If we were to go with someone that has 0 head coaching experience and has only been an assistant coach, I think it's okay. And I think it's okay with Trajan as long as they build the rapport of understanding like where both their mindsets is. Because as much as Trajan is now our CEO, as Mr. Gores would say, and being in charge of everything and not having a leash and being the man to make all the decisions, like just going to run it by Tom for how much it's going to cost. And he's just going to say yes and write off on it. Like that's where we're at with this. And the way that I look at it is as long as he has, whether it's a guy that's never coached a day in his life or a guy that's already had a couple seasons under his belt, I think Trajan will be more involved with the X's and O's type deal with the coach than we understand that like Troy Weaver was. Like Troy Weaver wasn't really involved in that type of discussion with the head coach because he didn't have that experience. Now Trajan played overseas. He had a very good college career at Duke. So he's very educated on the game itself. So I think with Trajan, depending on who he brings in, I think he's going to be at almost a day-to-day basis involved on everything that's happening with these guys' player progression. And as a player, I think that's a win because you're seeing the guy that's in charge of your contract and keeping and valuing you, that's actually showing interest in you every day for your progress. I think that's massive. So with Trajan's experience and what he knows about the game and what he knows about the business behind it, whoever he brings in, I think he's going to mentor with how he wants the team to be coached as well.
Yeah, and so Mark Stein is reporting that the Pistons do have interest in James Borrego, but he burned me on the episode I did with Dave Dahlin, the Pistons fanatic, when I talked about, because that whole podcast was basically about bringing Monty back. That was going to be the most likely outcome. So Mark Stein, he definitely burned me, but he is reporting that the Pistons have interest in James Borrego. That's the guy that's at the top of my list, and also Mike Inori. So yeah, he's also being, like I said, he's being interviewed, so they have interest in him as well. But James Borrego is my guy. I just want an offensive-minded coach. I think this you can bring in, whether it's Dan Burke or another defensive coordinator, you can bring someone else in to get the defense going. But a head coach that really knows X's and O's, that's going to have these guys execute his play style, put these guys in a position where they can play to their strengths, that is what I want to see. And that is something James Borrego offers you. And, when he was in Charlotte, he worked with some pretty out there personalities from like Miles Bridges, Terry Rozier, Kelly Oubre, LaMelo Ball, and he got them to work as one unit to get 43 wins in his final year. And I feel like, unfortunately, he was let go way too early. So this is a guy that I feel like can be here for a number of years. Like I said, I don't want a coach that's only going to be here for like 3 seasons. You are on Cade's timeline. You have got to get this right. You have to find a guy that's going to be here for a long time to make things work, because Cade, yes, he's going to be signing his extension, but that time will come quickly. And if you don't start racking up the wins, if you don't start building that foundation, if you don't start establishing that culture, it's not going to. We're going to be back here in a few seasons talking about what are the Pistons going to do at the top of the draft. Like, I don't want to keep having these conversations. I want them to bring in a guy that can grow with this team. And this is what I said on the pin down the other day. I would like them to find a coach that grew up in the game of basketball the way it is played today. Someone that got their start when, spacing became like the number one thing, athletic wings that could shoot and do all these different things. That is what I want. I want that type of coach that came up in that style of basketball. I don't want a Stan Van Gundy or a guy that's, or another Monty Williams where they're stubborn in their ways. They're not looking to grow. They're not looking to evaluate themselves. I want a young coach that has came up in the way the game of basketball is played today.
Yeah, and I think with James Borrego too, as much as I don't want to fully compare the roster because they aren't that similar, but with a Cade Cunningham and Borrego already having to coach a point guard that has so many different abilities, I think that's already a win, because even in the presser, Trajan Langdon addressed the importance of Cade Cunningham to this organization.
Yep.
He made it so like obsolete to no other player on the team is as important as Cade Cunningham right now. Like, we don't want to waste the time that we have with this guy. And if they bring in a Borrego with a guy that has coached with a guy like LaMelo Ball, that has been able to play so well in transition, can shoot the 3 ball really well, wants to get his players involved. Cade's not as flashy as LaMelo Ball, but does the same type of point guard, like they have the same type of attributes with how they want to distribute. So I think already bringing in a guy like Borrego already has an idea of how to like function this offense and how to create this offense with the roster they have. Now, any other player comparisons, maybe like a Terry Rozier is kind of similar to a Jaden Ivey. Terry Rozier could shoot the 3 a lot better than Jaden Ivey could, but they both could get to the hole the same ability. So I think Borrego would be such a win here. And even if I'm him sitting and having these interviews with Detroit, you just look at the roster and you can already see a resemblance. And then being able to come to this team and kind of do whatever you want to do and have a guy like Trajan Langdon behind you, giving you everything you need to do to be successful, especially with the huge cap space that we have. I don't think it's a job that you want to pass up, because I think he could be really successful here and he could grow a lot of these young guys.
I like that you brought that up too, because since he had success with LaMelo and Terry Rozier, you could probably see some offensive schemes that benefit like a Cade Cunningham and a Marcus Sasser backcourt where, hey, this worked for these guys, where you have a taller point guard and you have an undersized off guard. If I made it work with LaMelo and Terry Rozier, I could probably make it work with Cade and Marcus Sasser. Not saying Sasser should be the full-time starter. I'm just saying, if he's not traded, that means Trajan Langdon probably thinks of him as maybe a potential piece for the future. So bringing in a coach that's had success with smallish, mismatched backcourts, that might be a good thing. We do have one trade rumor that I do want to talk about now. It's not a player that's going to another team. It's just that the Detroit Pistons are evaluating the market for Isaiah Stewart. And I know you are high on trading him. I'm not. So I'm just going to turn it over to you first, and then I'll share my thoughts, and then we'll end the podcast.
Yeah, with Isaiah Stewart, man, it's all about assets, dude. So if we're gonna give him away, it's gonna probably be to a contending team. It's not gonna be a rebuilding organization. It'll be a guy. It'll be to a team that needs a four that can play defense quite well and can shoot the three ball. Now, if we're gonna get rid of him, oh my god, I would love it, but I don't think we're going to. I don't see a lot of upside in Beef Stew, and that's just my opinion of being a Pistons fan for the last many years. Like watching him, I want him, if he's going to be a key asset to this team, I think the three ball percentage needs to go up still in the with this consistency of it. And I think bringing in a shooting coach might actually help him. But if we can get some good assets out of trading Isaiah Stewart, I could see it happening. I mean, we talked about a lot of these guys on this team that you could ship them out for something, and it won't change a whole lot just because this roster still hasn't meshed very well. So like I haven't seen Beef Stew and Jalen Duren really play well together. Stu plays okay with Cade because I think Cade knows what Stewart wants to do on the offensive end, so it's easier for him to set him up because they've been playing together for such a not a long period of time, but since Cade has been in the league. So, but if we're gonna move someone like Stewart, I think it just depends what we get out of it. I'd be okay with the trade. I'd also be okay with him staying if we have to keep him and kind of use him as a 6-man, 7th-man rotation. I just think his shooting definitely needs to improve.
Still shot 38%, but I get what you mean by the shooting. Like you want to see him take more attempts. You want the release to be a little quicker, and you want him to be able to attack closeouts, even though he is shooting 38%. There's still a lot to work with. Teams do not take him seriously from beyond the arc. That's a very true statement right there. But also what you're saying is he's probably the most valuable trade piece outside of Cade Cunningham right now, just because you see a clear role for him on a contender. I personally don't want to trade him because I like the versatility he brings on defense. He's a guy that, yeah, he's not going to lead the league in blocks, but he can protect the rim. He makes things difficult for centers. He has switchability where he can make things uncomfortable for even like a Jason Tatum. Again, not going to stop him, but make him uncomfortable. And plus, if you were to sign someone like a Nick Claxton, the versatility with Isaiah Stewart and him defensively, I really like that. Isaiah Stewart can be the muscle, and then Nick Claxton can be the free safety, the guy that roams around and protects the rim. And they both offer switching ability. I would love to see something like that. And I think Isaiah Stewart will be more valuable as the Pistons get better over the next coming years. And that's why you see teams like Oklahoma City and Boston rumored to want to trade for a guy like Isaiah Stewart because they see what he brings to a team and they're like, okay, we can use someone like this. And if he's on a better team, he's going to look that much better.
Yeah, and I'll preach it. I always preach it to the day I die on this podcast. It's not always about the NBA talent at hand. It's about the situation the player is put in for him to be successful. And maybe Beef Stew's success is not in Detroit. Maybe it is at a Boston, or maybe even like a Dallas that needs a shooter that can play defense and that can play in the interior pretty well. But like I said, it's about assets. It's about what we're going to gain from this. Like we can't just give this guy away because we did just sign him to a contract. So I thought when they did give him that contract that he was going to be like a long-term puzzle piece for us. But now again, we are completely transitioning into a whole different management, coaching staff. Like everything's going to be different. So if Trajan wants to trade him, he's going to trade him. He's showed us that he is not afraid to just show somebody the door. Like if it's not it, it's not it. And I think when it comes to him evaling players, which he probably did all 15 on the roster, I think maybe that was discussed between him and Isaiah Stewart. It's like, hey, we don't know if you're going to fit in this role that we need you here. Maybe it'd be better if you go somewhere else. Like they maybe have already had that type of conversation. So I think a lot with the new organization, with everyone that's in charge, Trajan running the show, as much as it's so hard to say because it should already be a thing, but the honesty needs to be consistent and he needs to have a plan and needs to follow through with that plan. Like we always saw with Monty is I'm not going to rotate 90 players on my team. And then it's like, why is someone from the G League like suiting up right now for Detroit? Like, we don't understand what's going on. So,
a lot of injuries.
So it's just, we're going to find out a lot. And I think we're even going to find out even more Wednesday when the draft comes. I think the draft's at 8 on Wednesday. So there's going to be there's been a lot of speculation through every Pistons podcast, and no one's really sure what kind of move we're going to make. But Wednesday we're going to figure it the hell out, because we're going to see if we're going to take a shot at a guy at 5, or we're just going to trade back, and we're going to work with free agency, and we're going to see what we can do when we like dip our toes in that water. So I'm excited for it. It's a good change. We needed the change, and hopefully everything pans out the way like we need it to.
100%. And when you and I get back on a podcast together, which will be sometime next week, we'll share our thoughts about the draft. We'll talk more about these bad contract players. We'll do a little bit deeper dive into them. We only had so much time tonight to really talk about this press conference, Monty Williams firing. But yeah, when we meet back up, we'll have a lot more to talk about. But anyways, thank you guys for listening to the 3 Championship Drive podcast. Do us a favor, go to Google, Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Hit the follow button. After you hit the follow button, rate with 5 stars. Tell us how you reacted to the press conference with Trajan Langdon. But more importantly, tell a Pistons fan